Goeiemôre en welkom op Groot Plaas saam met my, Elsa Esterhuizen. Ek is vreeslik opgewonde oor vanoggend se gesprek, want ons gesels vandag met die baie bekende hoofekonoom van Agbiz, Wandile Sihlobo, oor sy nuwe boek Finding Common Ground, rakende landboukwessies. So bly gerus ingeskakel vir hierdie interessante gesprek, want ons gaan hom ook onder andere so 'n bietjie beter leer ken. Dit volg na vandag se landbounuus. 'n Front wat van môre af oor die land in beweeg, kan die komende naweek reën bring, veral oor so ver noord as die suidelike dele van die Vrystaat en die noordelike dele van die Oos-Kaap. Landbou.com berig, hoewel neerslae oor die dele lig behoort te wees, word swaar reën môre tot Saterdag oor groot gedeeltes van die Swartland, die stad Kaapstad, die aangrensende dele van die binneland en die Suid-Kaap verwag. Die onafhanklike landbouweerkundige Johan van den Berg meen, weerstelsels dui tans aan dat tot 40 mm of meer oor die gebiede moontlik sal wees, terwyl die stelsel ook hoog teen die Weskus op reën kan veroorsaak. Van den Berg sê die stelsel kan tot 'n mate verligting bring vir distrikte soos Kalvinia en Williston, wat onder erge droogtetoestande gebuk gaan. Reën is glo ook moontlik oor Carnarvon en Fraserburg. Sneeu is moontlik oor die hooggeleë dele van die Wes, Noord en Oos-Kaap en oor veral die suidelike Drakensberge. Van den Berg waarsku ook dat uiters gevaarlike toestande vir kleinvee van môre af oor die sentrale tot suidelike en suidoostelike dele van die land moontlik is. Baie sterk westewind gaan die frontale stelsels voorafgaan, terwyl snelhede van tot 50 km/h moontlik is, wat die gevaar van weggolfveldbrande verhoog. En Tongaat Hewlett het toestemming van die mededingingstribunaal gekry om sy stysel-afdeling aan Barloworld te verkoop, terwyl Barloworld glo onseker is oor of dit nog die geld werd is. Volgens 'n berig op Netwerk 24 het die mededingingstribunaal die voorgestelde transaksie amptelik sonder voorwaardes goedgekeur. Dit volg nadat die beleerde suikerreus in Februarie aangekondig het dat hy beoog om sy winsgewendste afdeling Tongaat Hewlett Starch vir R5,35 miljard te verkoop en Barloworld kort daarna 'n aanbod gemaak het. Die maatskappy is op die oomblik steeds met Barloworld in 'n dispuut gewikkel oor of die waarde van sy styselafdeling weens die COVID-19 pandemie en die gepaardgaande staat van inperking nie nou heelwat minder is as wat daar aanvanklik gesê is nie. Intussen het die uitvoerende hoof van Tongaat, Gavin Hudson, gesê die maatskappy is vasbeslote om die stysel-afdeling te verkoop en kan na die goedkeuring van die tribunaal daarop fokus om die dispuut tot 'n einde te bring. Die verkoop van die stysel-afdeling is glo die kern tot Tongaat se omkeerplan wat verlede jaar van stapel gestuur is nadat 'n boekhouskandaal in 2019 aan die lig gekom het. Daarmee vandag se landbounuus. Ons gesels vanoggend met die baie bekende hoofekonoom van Agbiz, Wandile Sihlobo, oor sy nuwe boek Finding Common Ground, rakende landboukwessies. So good morning and thank you for joining us, Wandile.
Good morning, Elsie. Thanks for having me on.
And congratulations from my side as well.
Thank you.
Let's start with some background on yourself. I mean, where did you grow up and from where the interest in the agricultural sector?
Yeah, I grew up in the Eastern Cape, spread in a number of towns, from the town of Lusikisiki, town of Engcobo, East London, and also King Williamstown. So the interest in agriculture per se, I would say, in across those towns, really more on a smallholder farming side. But where I took an interest on agricultural economics, it was when I was in my first year at the University of Fort Hare, where I initially embarked to accounting, but during the course of the first year, that's where I caught an interest in agriculture, and then I moved to the agricultural economics.
Now let's talk about the book, because I'm sure you are very excited about this. I mean, how did you decide, how did you decide to write this book, and what was the reason behind it all?
Yeah, I think the concept visualization of the book is from a number of layers, Elsie, because it is a book that I believe that could be read by all South Africans. Now, for a normal South African that is not in agriculture or in any space that is in the food sector, what the book offers is really an eye to what is happening in the sector, the importance of it far beyond than the headline numbers that one would read either of GDP or of jobs, but more nuance in it. But also just the value that agriculture does for South Africa, the value that farmers bring to the livelihoods of the country. But also, in addition to that, it gives or it shows or attempts to show the opportunities that are there in the sector for those that might be interested in joining on the sector. But I think if you are a policymaker, it has some certain chapters that also offer insights to some of the issues that are being discussed. Either it's an issue of trade, it's an issue of diversity in the sector, it's an issue of land, and all of those matters. And if you are a farmer, I think all it does, you draw insights, particularly around about the market dynamics of trade. There's a lot of insights there, and also think critically about how we should go forward with the land reform. So it is a book that offers different perspectives depending on who's reading and looking forward. But it is a book that I've written, framed it for every South African to be able to read it. And it in part draws from some of the previous works that I had done and really set on and sequencing some of those themes and covering on it, Elsie, a number of themes, like I said, the land reform issue, the leadership stuff that is needed in the sector, the job creation that we so deeply need. And I think after this pandemic, the need for that will be even much larger. The issues of trade and what commodities should we be focusing on as a nation, the gender diversity and also the youth involvement in the sector is also an important part that we cover in the book, and also mega trends that are underpinning the sector as we move forward that everyone should be paying attention on. And I also take an eye and look at the African continent and what's going on there and what do all of those developments that are happening in the continent mean for us. And I'll close off about an important sector around the cannabis, which is an exciting new plant, not new per se, but new in terms of getting on into agriculture. That's how we try to package the book to cover all of the things that we felt that they were topical for agriculture.
Now, Wandile, I think there's quite a wide spectrum of topics covered by the agricultural sector. So how difficult was it to decide on these main themes or topics that you wrote about in the book?
Yeah, you're right, Elsie. There's a lot of things that are important in a sector, but I think what I tried to do, I looked back over the past 4 years in South Africa's agricultural sector. And the question that I had to present to myself was, what has been most topical in that period? And I think what helped in judging or what is important is the fact that I am involved in writing a number of columns for various newspapers. So I was able then to look back even what are some of the things that have consumed my time during those years and months. And that's how one came up with some of these themes. Try to aggregate any of the themes that were happening under the broader theme, which is where I felt that the 8 themes that the book touched on are some of the meaningful things that we have seen over the past 4 years dominating the landscape.
And what do you like writing about most?
I think it differs, Elsie, because where I started writing, and it's in 2 layers, there is a writing that one does for Agbiz clients and Agbiz members, which is really about looking at every key thing that is happening on an economic perspective of farming. And then we either offering insights on that, or we either offering insights about how to cope with that, or warning people about what's yet to happen, whatever perspective we put up. That's the one part. But also there is writing that I do on a popular media. Either I'm working through Media 24 or through formerly TISO Group, which is on a business day at this point. And all of those writings then in those platforms, they are largely determined but what I deem important at that time for agriculture, and also what's maybe is not really taken up into the headlines to alert the South Africans, because the goal when I attempt to write for those is largely also to inform, but also largely to really spark a debate about certain things that I felt that it is important and it needs a broader engagement about the sector. And if it is something that is specifically for the sector, then there's a number of outlets that cater for us in the agricultural community, where one is able to elevate themes in there. But I think that broadly, I'm attracted to anything that deals with the broader development of the sector, growth of the sector, development in the nature of the broader context, not only on the South African side where we look at the development in a transformation perspective, but I mean on a broader growth of the sector and rural development. Those are themes that I'm largely attracted to.
And why and how would you motivate farmers or other agricultural role players to read this book?
I think for agricultural role players and the farmers, I mean, they will find here different things. Firstly, I think that if you are farming, maybe you are quite busy involved in your own industry, in your own business, and also in your own subsector that you are involved in. What the book does, it offers you an eye to see what's happening in the other commodities, what's happening in a broader industry, but not only in South Africa, but globally, there is a part of that. But I also think that it gives them an eye on a policy perspective to say, what is it that we are all talking about? And also some of the decisions that gets to be taken on a policy perspective on what are some of the motivations that are behind that. Because as the way that we wrote the book, it is intersected with some of the commentary where even in some policy discussions that I have been involved in, where maybe somebody sees the final reports of a thing and they don't really know what's the human and the softer interaction behind those policies was like. And this book offers you the insight on the table on what was being discussed there and how did those discussions actually evolve and what's the sector now looking like. But I don't think it also offers them, even on the African continent, some of the things that do exist in there, occupying people, and some of the things that I deem as some of the key opportunities. So I think that anyone, either you are on the farming side or you are outside of the farming side or you are in the food and fiber value chain, the book will offer some level of insight from you, depending on what perspective will you be looking at it. But it is indeed, I've tried, I hope, to make it more on an easy read so that people don't have to really grind hard on it, but they can just scan through and be able to get what we are trying to communicate.
I especially like the title, Finding Common Ground. So, given the time that we find ourselves in today, not only in South Africa, but in the world, from an, agricultural economist point of view, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, I think how I came up with the title, Elsie, was really about what comprised the book. Half of the book, nearly around about 120 pages or so, it deals with the aspects of land reform. Through certain developments over the past 5 years, I didn't lean a lot into history. I rather looked at the contemporary things and the most recent events that have been happening over the past 5 years, while obviously referencing to a certain extent on what has been happening on a historical side, and took the reader into context even on some of the platforms that I've been involved in. If you think, for example, the president's land and a panel on land reform and agriculture, on why certain decisions were taken and how did those conversation involved. But also beyond that, looking on my judgment of the sector about how these policies are developing and coming up to say finding common ground. It's me seeing in the medium to long run a convergence of opinions in some of these contentious issues in agriculture. Again, one of those being on the land reform side, to say those that have been pushing extremely hard for aggressive measures and those that have been thinking about some of the issues that are more pragmatic and those that have been really reluctant on engaging onto this, all trying to converge at some point to work towards a workable solution. And in that, me offering some of the ideas about how to take forward this policy and what are some of the things that I believe will help us to be more pragmatic. That's how I come up with that view where I say finding common ground. And I think towards the end of the book, I express my hopefulness about South Africa and the South African community at large really coming together and finding some of these solutions that will help on assisting the sector. And I think then by the last point on this is to say now being in the COVID-19, I mean, I finished the book writing it around about December 2019. I had no conception that we would be dealing with the pandemic at this time. But I do think that even in this time, when one thinks about the post-COVID agricultural economy, the book does offer all of those insights about, it remains relevant about insights about how to rebuild the sector and continue being in a competitive environment.
Well, I can't wait to read this book. It is available in bookstores as well as there's also an online edition. Am I right?
Yes, it's available in all major bookstores in South Africa, and also in all major online outlets any South African might be able to find. The book is there.
And Wandile, I mean, we've spoken about this book now, but I want to also refer to the latest issues in the agricultural sector. What would you point out at this moment in terms of something that needs urgent attention?
I think that the things that now are needing to urgent attention, or what people are focusing on, we are all thinking about how is the sector going to adapt on a post-COVID-19 economy. We haven't been largely interacted like the other broader sectors of the economy. There were certain subsectors that were interrupted for a certain period. You think, for example, the wine industry, wool, cotton were some of those few subsectors. But obviously, as we loosened up to get to level 4, level 3, they were allowed to resume their activity. Yes, they've made some bit of losses during the time when they were closed and not trading. But I think now that we are already here, we are thinking about the post-COVID economy. And the most important thing for the sector is on these agricultural master plans that are being devised, which will comprise that recovery package for South Africa's agricultural sector. So I think that farmers and any other people that are interested in the sector should participate in those events, make sure that their views are captured about how the development and the growth of the sector will be. And I think that's the most important part. And I do think that in some of the policy matters that have dominated the sector, there might be a change of tone, because now we're at a state where South Africa really needs a more increased private sector participation, but also very hungry for investments to go forward in the reconstruction. That the tone will be largely towards that line.
You are still so young. I think we are the same age, but you're such an inspiration. So good luck with this book. And yes, we'll speak to you again in future. Dit was dan Wandile Sihlobo van Agbiz.